Oh my God! Oh! Oh! Oh, let's look at that again. Oh my God! What? Hello everyone, my name is Majosh with British Columns. On today's news, Iran has fired 2 missiles towards Diego Garcia. But before we look at that news, let's first turn our attention to Dimona in Israel. Buildings collapse in Dimona as Iran targets Israel. 5 injured in northern barrage from Lebanon. It says a building in Dimona collapsed as a result of an impact from an Iranian munition on Saturday evening after sirens sounded in southern and northern Israel. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh no! No! No, 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 no. You see there the terrifying impact of a missile hitting a building in Dimona in Israel. Israel police and border guards officers are dispatched to conduct scans for, whatever remains from this missile that hit the Western Galilee area after the IDF intercept the missiles. Also, a fire broke out on Saturday after a direct hit on a house in Israel, where firefighters are working to extinguish the blaze. 4 impact sites were reported in the area. In Kafar, a separate structure sustained minor damage to its roof. Another home was struck by a direct hit, and external damage was also caused to a 4-story building. We have another video here. Let's take a look. No lights in the building as present. They seem to be using some small light there. And we can see the hole in that area of the wall where the missile likely hit first. We can see the officers there and some fire workers there in the building looking at the wreckage and the damage that has been caused. Initial reports suggest that the shrapnel caused significant damage to the structure with no direct missile impact reported. MDA said a man in his 70s was lightly injured while making his way to a shelter. The Shamir Medical Center said a man in his 40s was treated for mild injuries sustained from a blast in Rishon LeZion. The missile is believed to have weighed around 100 kilograms, according to Hebrew media, though this has not been officially confirmed. The incident appears to be another example of a splitting warhead, which has been used in previous missile strikes on central Israel. This is absolutely horrifying. Very, very horrifying. I'm still not settled after watching this video of the impact from this shrapnel. I can't imagine how I would feel to be in that location if a missile were to hit this building that I'm in right now. And, I suffer mild injuries like that man in his 40s. How I would be shaken up, how I would feel right now, how unsafe I would feel. Let's turn our attention to the targeted area of Garcia by Iran, which they fired 2 missiles.
It's Tomlinson who said, breaking, Iran reportedly fired 2 missiles toward Diego Garcia, a joint U.S.-UK base in the Indian Ocean. The strike marks the Islamic Republic's first attempt to threaten U.S. interests beyond the Middle East. We are getting reaction coming in from...
So Diego Garcia is beyond the Middle East, and it reports that Iran has fired these 2 missiles towards that area. So it seems that Iran is now being reckless, very reckless, with the shrapnel hitting that location in Israel. And now the reports are saying also that Diego Garcia, which is beyond the Middle East, has been targeted by Iran. But let's continue to listen.
Actually heard from Eylon Levy, who is the former Israeli government spokesperson. He posted about it, saying if the Iranian regime's missiles can reach Diego Garcia, they can reach London. The Islamic Republic is a global menace. I do want to bring in our friend Mark Chandler to talk much more about all of this here. He is, of course, with Coastal Carolina University, as well as a former senior defense intelligence official.
No missiles actually struck the base or even nearby. But what can you tell me about that?
Well, a couple of things, Josh. This shows that Iran is really taking the fight to the enemy, and that's to us.
Yes, Iran is taking the fight to the U.S. and Israel, but in a very reckless way, in an irresponsible way, involving civilians that has nothing to do with this conflict. But let's continue to listen to the reporter.
Anytime we would conduct significant bombing operations in the Middle East, it shortens the range for our bombers. They don't have to fly from the United States. And it gives us the opportunity to rapidly turn our combat operations. I believe this is the first time I can find in history that Diego Garcia has been targeted. So that tells us that Iran is pushing out. I'm not surprised by the range of the Iranian missiles. You know, we've known for some time that they've had missiles that can range into southern Europe, and they have been, as we discussed last week, working on an intercontinental ballistic missile. So it's within the ranges, but the fact that they're doing it shows that Iran is pushing this fight further out.
Britain condemns the reckless attacks after Iran fires missiles at the UK/US Diego Garcia air base in the Indian Ocean. Iran being very reckless with this, very reckless.
And of course, right here, we are getting reaction coming in from all over. This is the Associated Press, because Britain is now condemning the, quote, reckless attacks after Iran fired the missiles at the UK-US Diego Garcia air base there in the Indian Ocean. Not quite clear if we're going to hear from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We know he's been making remarks on weekends as well. So if we get any of those, we will make sure to bring those to you. Now, something else that I mentioned kind of leading into this is that we've learned that a kindergarten over in central Israel was hit by a missile a bit earlier on today. Not quite clear if that is a missile that was fired by Hezbollah, which is backed, of course, by Iran out of Lebanon, but also the possibility that it was fired by Iran. I want to play for you a soundbite that just came in from the Israel Defense Forces about that before we get into the conversation.
We are here in Saturday morning. It's the weekend in Israel. Most of the people are in their homes, but you can see here the penetration of a bomb, a cluster bomb, into this kindergarten. Fortunately, there weren't any kids in this garden. But just imagine what would have happened if kids were here playing, staying during their daily routine.
So this is very reckless by Iran, very, very reckless by the regime. I mean, imagine just last week thinking as a parent, thinking as a relative, thinking as a protector, sending your child to this kindergarten and now to find out that it was struck by a bomb. Imagine if kids were there. How devastating the parents must be. Are they thinking they're fortunate to not have their kids there, or they're scared and terrified and calling on the Israeli government to clamp down on Iran further, sink its teeth into Iran's military regime further to solidify this regime change that they're seeking there in Iran? This is very reckless. Very reckless. I can't imagine how the parents must be feeling, how the town, the city must be feeling about this. Iran being very reckless with their targets. But let's continue to listen.
Again, we see that our enemies aim their targets to civilian population. They try to kill and to impact as much as they can.
All right, so again, a quick soundbite right there from the IDF as they were on the scene there of that kindergarten struck. And I guess, Mark, that brings up kind of the point once again that we've heard time and time again, that Iran and these terror proxies are not just targeting military sites, because you have to imagine that there was not a military site for Israel in that kindergarten building. So they are targeting civilians rather than military sites.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. And I think you brought up an excellent point. You know, determining where this missile came from, whether it came from Hezbollah or came from Iran itself, shows that they are escalating this. You know, Iran is kind of, I'll say, taking the gloves off. They have gone after a lot of civilian targets, especially in Israel. And along with.
Yes, Iran has taken the gloves off, but taking the gloves off in what kind of way? If this was sports, this would be unsportsmanlike, unwatchable. Who would pay for this if this was sports? Who would take their kids there to go and see this? Who would take their families there to go and see this if this was sports? You know, with the term they're taking the gloves off. This is very reckless and uncalled for.
Hezbollah has launched several hundred missiles and rockets since the beginning of this combat operation. So you can see that. And Iran this week, you know, escalated in the fact that they went after some refineries in Israel. And now they've gone after, this is not the first time they've gone after civilian targets, and they're going to continue to do so. What they've changed.
How does the U.S. and Israel prepare for this? How do they organize and plan to structure their defense in light of the fact that Iran is being this reckless? How do they protect civilians? How do they protect the schools, the hospitals, the churches, wherever average civilians locate, the malls, you name it, beauty salons, barbershops, supermarkets? How do they protect? How do they encourage the people that they're going to be safe? I believe now this is time for them to take this much more serious, if I may say, than they have, and for the Iranian people to call on the Islamic regime to cut this out. Let's put an end to this. Let's stop. Is it time for peace talks to pull back, to disengage? This is not healthy.
Israel has an excellent air defense, anti-ballistic, anti-drone capability, but it's not infallible. So when we look at that, Iran has gone to using cluster munitions, and that's what the IDF spokesman was talking about there. What happens here is these actually open up, if you will, in flight over their target area, and makes it almost impossible to take out all the different submunitions that.
So that's what possibly happened here with this cluster bomb. That seemed like it was a direct bomb, right? But for this that happened here, which they say may be a shrapnel from the missile, possibly that's what happened here. But let's continue to listen. And as he was saying, you know, Israel's defense system, though it being really good, with these type of missiles that breaks off, it's not always going to be 100% accurate in its defense against these type of weapons. And so again, it begs the question, civilian safety.
Come out of a warhead. So now we have to worry about how that's doing. And there's been several Israeli deaths throughout this week based on these cluster munitions. They're more effective and they're really indiscriminate. Iran is just indiscriminately targeting and trying to inflict as much pain on Israel as possible at this time. It's more of a threat to Israel when they're using these cluster munitions, and that's their primary target. Take out as many civilians, make it painful for the Israeli population, and try to turn this fight into Iran's favor, or at least get the sentiment going for Iran out here.
How is this turning the fight into Iran's favor? How does the rest of the Gulf look at Iran now? What is the future of Iran if this is how they choose to conduct themselves in this conflict? Targeting civilians, being reckless. taking the fight to Israel. How? How? This is non-military. So they just want to inflict whatever kind of pain they can inflict on Israel and where elsewhere that they believe they can hurt the US and Israel for this conflict that's going on. That is reckless. That is very reckless.
Is just coming in from the Israeli Air Force as they say during an operational mission of the Air Force over Iranian airspace, a surface-to-air missile launch was detected toward an Israeli fighter jet. The crew acted in accordance with procedures, no damage caused to the aircraft, and the mission was completed as planned. Since the start of the war, several attempts have been made to strike Israeli fighter jets over Iranian airspace, and the air crews have successfully countered the threat. The Air Force will continue to fly and strike wherever required across Iran and will complete its missions under threat in every operational sort. Now, it's interesting here because we're talking about, the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli military, as they are conducting these different strikes. And it appears that Israel and the U.S. as well have not stopped any of these. These are still happening on those military sites. We're not necessarily hearing as much about it, but it is still happening pretty much day after day.
Yeah, it is, Josh. And I think that's important for your audience to understand. This is day 21 of the fighting out there. We're still a few weeks out from having a complete military success, I will call it, in the combat operations. We're rolling back and hitting their C2 command and control targets. We're definitely having a lot of success in decapitating Iranian leadership. We've taken out several key leaders over the last 3 weeks, and each time a new replacement pops up, they're obviously going after those, both the U.S. and Israel. But it's not an easy mission. And you listen to that IAF report right there, you can see that the Iranians still have combat capability. The attack on the kindergarten today, the attack on Diego Garcia, air defense attacks. Earlier in the week, it was reported, although the Pentagon's not talking a lot about it, that a U.S. F-35 was likely attacked with a surface-to-air missile. So there is still that capability within Iran.
How much more missile capabilities does Iran have after 21 days? Still striking Israel, still attacking the U.S., still, as it was reported with Garcia, that missile beyond the region there in the Middle East. So how much more capabilities does Iran possess? And how long and how much further will they go with this conflict that is happening? How long does Israel plan to continue this fight?